I don't think, when the Lisbon Treaty was drafted, there was, they ever thought that anyone would want to leave the European Union. So this is all a new process, both for Britain and for the EU. And I remember EU Council President Donald Tusk saying that some parts of this process will be difficult, it will be confrontational in some aspects, and then he wants the EU to determine the pace at which all of this will go. Do you think that this is probably to help Britain probably regret its decision?
Well, it's clearly, you said it's uncharted territory. The article was put there not because they thought anyone could, but when you put in a document, when you put a document together in civilized society, you have to, it's freedom of association, and of course it has to be freedom, some element of freedom of disassociation or disengaging. And in civilized society, you want to create that framework. But yes, you're right. A lot of people didn't anticipate, and I can tell you, quite a few people didn't anticipate it was going to be Britain in the first place that would, trigger the Article 50. So now that it's on, the detail, that's why they say the devil is in the detail. What it'll take to exit, is quite clear. There has to be a series of negotiations. I mean, the rest of the EU has to be brought into that negotiation. It'll be Great Britain on one side and the European Commission on another. And it'll be a question of which party can you can take away with you in terms of the negotiations. So but it's good when you observe it. You can see that there's a lot to learn from it in terms of procedure. I mean, you have to build procedure in human engagement. There's a lot of procedure, there's a lot of process which has to be followed. Anything otherwise will be very, very untidy because there are rights to consider. Take, for example, in the body of what should be negotiated, you have to negotiate the rights of European citizens that live in the UK, the rights of British citizens, UK citizens that live in the Union, their work, in terms of what is going to be the new status between Britain and the United Kingdom, all the advantages which they had as part of the Union. But of course, again, the flip side of that, it gives them more independence, and which is what a lot of them were arguing about. It gives them more independence to make decisions, to choose their own trade partners, to choose at what rate, to what extent they will deal with those trade partners. Otherwise, even now, they have some trade agreements that binds them with the Union. How do you disengage from those trade agreements? How do you disengage? And at some point in time, the issue is that Britain will be faced with questions as to whether it wants to eat its cake and have it at the same time.
Do you think that Great Britain has been better, has gotten the better end of the stick of being in the EU?
Well, it's difficult to say except you do a real analysis. Without a doubt, Britain at some point in time benefited. Number one, it was a very powerful member of the EU. And leveraging on the powers of the EU as a collective, Britain indirectly had an extension of its own powers. But having said that, that is, it had to share, that. On the other hand as well, because of its commitment to the EU, it had to be a bit more flexible as to what it can claim to have total jurisdiction over. Take, for example, the issue of immigration. It had to be flexible. And so the whole idea, as I said, there's a balance between what are the advantages of nationalism and what are the advantages of globalism. And Britain has gotten to a point in its political economy to say that the advantages of nationalism suits it better. And I believe that they have done a lot of thinking around economics. The British are very shrewd and they are very economically conscious. I mean, that's why they have the financial capital of the world. And I think it's in a process to want to keep that independence and keep that, advantage, comparative advantage. That is one of the things that's sort of, getting there. Apart from the groundswell of nationalism in Europe, as it were, Germany, you have them coming up in Finland, in France, and the elections are coming in those countries now, and that of course will affect how the negotiations go.
Yeah, speaking of Africa, I just want to quickly bring this up,
Yes.
how this would affect Nigeria at the end of the day. I mean, now it's becoming real.
Yes.
that Britain will leave the European Union.
Yes.
We've talked about this before. Britain has
Yes.
said before nothing changes between our relationship
Yes.
with. But I've noticed in the past few months, or
Yes.
as the Brexit with the referendum, we've
Yes.
seen more movement of top-ranking officials of the
Yes.
British government coming to Nigeria
Yes.
and assuring us and so on. It does tell you that they're afraid they could lose some of their partners who might be afraid that this divorce will cost them also.
Yes, I think the British would always, they're going to scale up on their diplomacy. I don't think they want to lose any partners, any trade partners. I don't think they would ever want to lose a strong foothold, having a friendly partner in a place like Africa. And of course, Nigeria is their obvious choice. But, I would like to step away from what is in it for them. What is in it for them? What is in it for us as Nigerians? What is in it for us as Africans? As far as I'm concerned, they've created, out of one big market, they've created two. Now, with two, there is competition. And with competition, there's more efficiency, and you could have bargained for better prices. So, by all means, for me, as a person, all jolly good.
And
it
for
will
businesses
pay.
too.
For businesses, jolly good. And, the world now is becoming, Africa and Nigeria is not as disadvantaged as we used to be before, so much so that we must listen to either Britain or one country to hold us in the hand to be able to negotiate and deal with other countries. So it will ultimately depend on our own capability, the kind of people that man our negotiation tables. It'll depend on people, it'll depend on the kind of people that craft our national interests, both trade interests, economic and trade interests, political interests, and social interests.
Still ahead on Diplomatic Channel. Are the Syria talks headed towards a solution in Geneva? We'll find out in a moment. Please join us again.